I hope that over the next sort of 40 minutes, something like that, that I can provide you with some interesting insights, some ideas about what is going on in terms of legal technology and our industry. And to maybe talk at the end a little bit about arbitration yourselves. So don't need to dwell on that, although it isn't a bad picture of me, actually. I tell you, my life is now the sublime to the ridiculous. 2 hours ago, I took 9 children to a Easter pantomime. Who knew that there was such a thing? But an Easter pantomime starring Bobby Davro. And here I am now in this august company. So you can work out which is the sublime and the ridiculous yourselves. But I do a lot of different things now, as Ben has said. What I'm going to cover today is the impact of technology on our market, a bit about adoption, a bit about benefits, and then finishing with a focus on arbitration. So why does this matter? Well, I would say that adopting technology, and I'm going to call it law tech, we'll come back to that in a moment, but has really become a crucial thing. Clients' expectations around technology are increasing, and improved customer experience has been a sort of essential goal for firms to stay competitive in the legal market. And technology has a real key role to play in improving that experience. And I'm really confident that technology will very shortly distinguish successful legal businesses from others. And so my conclusion really is that adoption is a survival issue. And this is even more acute in the wake of the pandemic and the global upheaval that the sort of perma-crisis that we appear to be living through. And organisations' ability to adapt quickly to market pressures and rapidly changing clients' expectations has become even more critical in such a volatile world. So hopefully you, so far, you're thinking, all right, okay. I don't completely disagree with her. This is maybe a worthwhile topic of discussion and interest. And you're not regretting your decision to wait for the glass of wine, which I think comes after this. So let me start with the UK. So the UK is actually a really good place to start to get to understand what is happening in the legal technology space as it's currently leading Europe. And some stats there. It might be tricky to see at the back, but UK law techs have raised 650 million, and that is going up and up and up. The investment in them has increased threefold in the last couple of years. And the UK makes up around 44% of the law tech ecosystem, which is actually, because we think that the UK is fairly dominant when it comes to Europe and traditional legal services, but that's actually more than double its impact in terms of the legal services market traditionally. There are more than a couple of hundred UK-based law tech startups, many of them scale-ups now, employing around 750,000 people. And I find this quite amazing, and I stress that this is in percentage terms, but law tech is outgrowing fintech and health tech. So there's data from 2021 that evidences that actually that was the busiest ever year for law tech, with a record 2.5 billion being raised by startups and scale-ups. And of course, M&A activity is always a key indicator, isn't it? And 55% increase in legal tech deals between 2020 and 2021. and the global spend increased to $1.3 trillion. So just very quickly, you might notice that I'm talking about law tech, legal tech, tomato, you know, it's all the same. I will probably jump between the two. But just as the many lawyers in the room, definitionally, what I think of it is that the technology that is used by legal services providers and the justice community to help them deliver legal services or resolve disputes. So it includes technology that allows businesses and individuals to take care of their own legal matters as well. We'll come on to that in a bit. So the ecosystem in the UK is really active and developing. We've got a growing range of accelerators and incubators that are solely focused on legal technologies. There's significant government funding. As Ben said, one of the bodies that I chair put over £20 million into funding collaborative research and development in professional services. So we covered law, accountancy, and insurance, actually. Really interesting. We've just concluded all of that spending with significant research insights that have come out of that. We have a really vibrant and growing community, which is, and I think this is a real differentiator in the UK, because we are supported by our professional and regulatory bodies. We probably have the most liberal legal services market in the world, and this has not only kept our lawyers on their toes, but has led to a real flourishing of new law ventures, both through traditional law firms and startups. And one of the things I did 10 years ago now was set up the very first alternative business structure with the co-op. So I think that this needs to be a real priority for those in the legal services industry. Research shows that it is, actually, that if you ask key stakeholders, partners, GCs, what's really important, then they will say this. But we'll come on to some of the what's said and the reality in a minute. But a recent survey that was commissioned by Microsoft and Linklaters found that 85% of organisations planned to deploy cloud-based solutions, and that's really the technology that sort of underpins most digital transformation strategies. That's the sort of the bottom line that you need. And they were going to do that over the next 2 years. In-house lawyers and risk and compliance professionals are now wielding considerable influence on technology decisions. And that makes sense, doesn't it? With in-house lawyers being ranked as the top influencers when it comes to giving green lights to big, chunky technological developments in corporate businesses. And according to PwC, 80% of the UK's top 10 law firms identified technology as their #1 priority for the next couple of years. However, that same report showed that IT spending is proportionately lower in legal than in almost every other similar profession or area of commerce. So law firms are sort of talking about it, saying it's really important, but they're not actually putting their money where their mouth is. So our clients are becoming more demanding of technological advancements and more influential around the board table, and we're in real danger of not spending nearly enough time, effort or energy on this. So we really do need to walk the talk. And I think that those who embrace technological development will be the winners in the end. So challenges that remain. In fact, there are many. Oh, can you see this at the back? Is that just about? I'm quite happy to send these round later on if that would help. So as the PwC report evidence, the adoption of technology in the legal sector remains less developed than other fields, where funding and regulatory alignment are more advanced, if you think about fintech. And LawTech still has a relatively low penetration rate across all segments of the law. Even in big law, where adoption is most advanced, it's often used in a relatively small and often siloed proportion of client work. And research indicates that this is something legal professionals are well aware of, and that they aren't reluctant to undertake training. Quite on the contrary, the Law Society did a report with the University of Oxford, and it showed there was huge appetite. Over 90% of the lawyers surveyed said that they really needed training. They really needed to be able to increase their knowledge and skill set in at least one area of technology. And that 4/5 that really did believe that productivity in their organisation would improve if the lawyers were trained on how to use new technologies. Well, of course, I would say, but nonetheless, training remains really low. The survey also found that only half of the respondents had undertaken any form of law tech training in the past 3 years. Most of that training was around sort of specific software packages, no generic training in relevant skills for the vast majority. So 71% said that they thought that they would need training in a thing called data analytics, compared with 3% who had actually received any training there. And 44% said they were generally very interested across the board in innovation and getting training around that. Only 7% had actually had it. So law does need to invest time in training and even basic awareness raising, as there's clearly a real appetite, and it's part of the answer to our profession's lack of technology skills. And ultimately we can start then to create a culture where the technology can be successfully adopted by law firms and legal departments. So I want to just bring it out a little bit at this point. So what are the wider implications, given that the legal system is changing so rapidly, with new legal service providers, regulatory influences, customers, and I would get into terrible trouble calling customers 10 years ago when we set up the co-op, but customers with greater buying power and other players that are forcing changes into the legal industry. The rise of legal technologies, especially in the context of AI, is really shedding light on the lagging nature of the legal professionals to adopt technologies, in contrast to our commercial business partners. So the commercial ecosystem is changing, and it's important to understand how the different players contribute to that evolution, not least for the more traditional law firms themselves, because we all have to compete against the new market entrants. And I just want to talk about two of them, really. First, the big four, obviously entering the legal space on a global scale. And there are many reasons why the big four are appealing to our clients. Obviously, their experience in consultancy, their inherently grounded in business approach, their international and corporate footprint, and last and by no means least, their investment capabilities in technology. The Big Four have really sizable research and development departments, and because of their different structuring, because of their corporate structuring, they're much more comfortable in setting aside resources for that future benefit. The second biggest change is the rise of Alps, alternative legal service providers. Now, Alps have been around in a sort of different iteration for quite some time. You might have heard of legal process outsourcing, and that was really the sort of the first type of alternative legal service provider. Now they have really extended their portfolios and what they do. So before, they became experts in document review and would go through a literal paper, boxes and boxes, tedious searches, hundreds of thousands of old contracts, letters, filings, etc. And they'd staff that resource with a lower cost or even automated, and create a repetitive process, a playbook for those searches. Well, that business model has been utterly transformed by the technology that is now available. And a recent report from Thomson Reuters found that although they don't do everything, usually, the Alps, they are increasingly doing more and more. They're expanding their scope. And 87% of law firms who were surveyed by Thomson Reuters said that they were using Alps. And that's up from 56% in 2015. So that's a huge rise. And in corporations, 74% said that they were using Alps. So interestingly, they're being more used by law firms than they are by in-house at the moment. And that was up from 60% in 2015. So, whilst they're mostly focused on that sort of repetitive document review and discovery work, they have quickly climbed up the value chain and no doubt will continue to do so. So there's a lot of interesting new and challenging competition. How have we responded to that? So a clear challenge for law firms is that whilst in-house teams face common issues with law firms, the research shows that they are much more advanced in terms of transformation. So in addition to the IDC commissioned research by Microsoft, which I told you about before, which evidenced the sort of the influence, the impact around the board table of the GCs, a Deloitte study on legal department transformation found that despite there is some conservatism, legal departments were really keen to explore new technologies. And secondly, they also recognised the import for the type of work that they are doing, driving huge efficiencies in terms of risk management and compliance. Enabling their usually hard-pushed teams to go up the value chain themselves, to do more challenging work. And 56% said that they were actively investing in these technologies. So these technologies are not your sort of, your software that you use every day. They're actually technologies that use natural language processing, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and if our clients are adopting those, then so must we. A second key hurdle to law tech adoption is, I'm afraid, the rather historic lack of IT investment in the legal sector, where the pace of technological adoption and innovation has been slower than many other industries, such as banking, with yearly spend as a percentage of fee income being much right at the bottom of any comparable industry. And this is partly because many law firms see themselves first and foremost as a partnership, as a practice, rather than as a business, and obviously are not structured to free up the same level of capital required for these types of investments. So again, the Law Society report on adoption showed that investors and law tech companies consider that whilst the funding environment is increasing, it still has a long way to go. But then we did some research at LawtechUK just this year, and actually the picture was much more positive. So not in terms of the overall spend, but actually that there was more investment, that as I said before, that law firms are actually, you can see this increase, law firms are changing rapidly, and pandemic has quite a lot to do with that as well, to ensure that they are investing for their present and their future. So the market is shifting rapidly. And in addition, we face real, I guess, structural barriers within the legal services market, with firms being still really wedded to the billable hour and the partnership model really inhibiting change. So both in-house departments and IT teams are viewed purely as cost centres, and they can come off as second best to core operations when it comes to investment. The bottom two figures here bear some consideration. So the risk is that we're going to increase our technological debt, I guess, which is building up and has been building up in the industry. So, and that will obviously require a much bigger investment in the near future, and that is going to be a difficult pill for many law firms to swallow. And of course, the investment needs to be beyond the financial. There is no point just throwing money at this issue, because it extends to time and culture and a lot of other resources. So although investment in technology is a relatively new area of spend for legal professionals, we also need to really make sure that we are taking the long view and ensuring that we are investing it in a way that is sensible. So often what I see is that firms have some great technology in place, but it is squandered. I mean, yeah, underutilised is putting it way too high. And, you know, I often say to law firms, well, do you know what Microsoft can do for you? Because actually, you know, what you have that you are currently paying for is some amazing technological tools that are just not being used. And quite frankly, if all lawyers knew how to use Microsoft Office properly, it would be transformational. So I think, you know, this is doable, is basically what I want to say. So in my experience, though, it is about culture and training. So you know, quite often, even if there is a real enthusiasm for new technology to begin with, if you don't ensure that is maintained, if you are putting new technology on very bad processes that mean that after a short period of time people are going to be disenchanted. If you don't give people the opportunity to keep that sort of drip, drip, drip training going, then actually it's probably going to end in tears. So, as I say, there are pressures here to adopt law tech, a need for greater efficiency, increasing workloads and the complexity of the work, the evolving demographic mix of lawyers with our younger, more tech-savvy lawyers just being completely bemused by the awful technology that they have to use at work. We had a bit of an example of that here, trying to get into your laptop, didn't we, Ben? But compared to the slick technology that they have at home and in every other aspect of their lives, there is that increased competition and, of course, that pressure from clients on cost and speed. So they are, I would say, multiple and compelling. And I just want to briefly touch on this as another very, very good reason to ensure that you have the right technological stack and you're using it in your business. Cyber is a real live area of concern. Data security and privacy is the subject of increasing legislation and regulation, and at the same time law firms, particularly barristers' chambers, are becoming increasingly targeted because we hold a wealth of sensitive data and we're not very good at protecting that. And you add to the law firm that they've got heaps of client cash as well sometimes. So it's not surprising, therefore, that 76% of the top 100 firms said that they were between somewhat and extremely, and I think most of them were probably at the extremely end, concerned about cyber security. And the National Cyber Security Centre said in a recent report that that the most significant cyber threats that law firms face were phishing, data breaches, ransomware and supply chain compromise, and that we have most of those problems are around phishing, but malware, infection, loss or leakage of confidential information are also really, really common and, of course, enormously underreported. So this is a really huge problem that we are facing. And of course, with arbitration, the international nature, the reliance on email and the prevalence of open-sourced cloud sharing platforms, arbitration is particularly susceptible to cyber attacks. So often the weakest link is the human, but the defence should be technologically founded, and they are out there, simple, easy to use, intuitive platforms that have been designed with security in mind. So things like, built-in multi-factor authentication, encryptions, information rights management, access levels, controls, and much, much more. So there really isn't much of an excuse if you balance the cost and the risk of what could happen to not invest in cyber. So hopefully I've convinced you that it's a good thing. I'm going to tell you how to do it now. So the real key here to success is around leadership commitment. So you've got to get the people in the key roles. And that's not just the people at the very, very top. Those are the people who are tasked with implementation as well. And of course, the key people who are the users to really buy into this. And the more involved in a digital transformation they are, the more likely, and this is evidence from McKinsey, so day follows night, you get those senior people involved and continuing to be involved, not just talking the talk, and you will have a much more successful implementation. We also need to second one is about building capabilities for the workforce of the present and the future. So we have to redefine individuals' roles and responsibilities so that they align with these new goals. It's utterly pointless not ensuring that we reward the behaviours that are actually we need to see to make these changes. So I often tease lawyers by saying that they need to think of themselves as data controllers and data collators now, but actually it isn't a tease because they do. Yeah, and it's really, really important. I remember 15 years ago when I first started talking about process is something in law, and you know, I have to put my tin hat on because people were really fundamentally offended that that what they did could be termed a process. But actually, if you can define it, if you can articulate it, then it is a process. And I think we also need to think of ourselves very differently in relation to the precious and dangerous commodity of data and information that we are utilising every day. So again, that was a really important factor in success. Empowering people to work in new ways. This is probably my number one thing. Tech adoption requires cultural and behavioural change. So that includes, just as sort of headlines, and these might feel really counterintuitive to our conservative profession, but calculated risk taking. That's really, really important. Increased collaboration and a real focus on the client or the customer. Everybody in the organisation has to be empowered and incentivised to embrace those changes. And that needs to be, you need to get into a virtuous cycle around that. So reinforcing those new behaviours and ways of working and doing that in a way that is formal and informal, and really encouraging people to challenge their old ways of working. And as Richard Susskind, we were talking about Richard before, as he sits on one of the LawtechUK panel, and he's very, very famous for saying many things, but I like this one, which is that it is incredibly difficult to convince a room full of millionaires that they've got their business model wrong. And you know, and he's absolutely right in that. It is really difficult, and it is wrong. And actually, if we can try to see beyond the short-term future, then actually we might be able to build something that is not only really successful, but hey, scalable. As well. And of course we've got to give people the tools to be able to do this, and a lot of that is about self-serve. You know, the days of you logging in a call to IT and then waiting for, you know, an hour, a week before they phone you back, before you can, you know, that is not a sustainable model into the future. And of course, as I said before, standardization is absolutely key. There's no point putting shiny new tech on old processes. And communication, to channel Tony Blair. You know, it really is vital during and after a digital transformation. And one of the real key things, and I think I do a lot in strategic change management generally, is to get a change story. Stories, narratives are incredibly powerful. That's how we've always learned. And it really helps people to understand why their organisation is going in this way, why it needs to change, and why those changes are important. So, you know, organisations who can do this usually end up with a successful transformation. In fact, McKinsey's research says if you can get a good story, you are 3 times more likely to be successful. It's that key. And if anybody hasn't read it, then I recommend, it'll take you half an hour to read Our Iceberg is Melting by John Cotter. It's about penguins, and it's a great intro to strategic change management. So how am I doing time-wise? Yeah, I'm going to whip through this, okay? Don't you worry. So if you can manage to successfully adopt, then there are massive benefits. And I don't need, McKinsey and others have made this really, really clear. So I'm going to give you, though, some real sort of life examples, I guess, because it is a complicated picture out there. When you think, well, where do, you know, what is out there? What could we do? Where could we start? And law tech is being used and bringing some real significant benefits, and there's much, much more to come. You don't need an army of IT people, you need to know how to code. A lot of the stuff comes sort of plug and play. So, you know, and you can train it as you go along, and it can be really as simple as intuitive as your Outlook or any other of your current applications. So these sorts of things. So from contract management with tools that support the full contract life cycle. So from automated contract creation using machine learning to assist with drafting and negotiating, to managing contractual obligations after signing, to risk management and discovery, due diligence, litigation risk, or managing IP portfolios, where the algorithm's job is to spot patterns and outliers, with the easy identification of risks, to predictive analytics, which I think is something that will become more and more relevant in your field in the not too distant future, where future risks can be predicted and therefore prevented. And here are some more examples. So lawyers are using technology to optimize legal research and case analysis, assess case strength, and manage documentation. And added to the huge increase in remote hearings, this is leading really to a digitization of justice and tools that support online resolution. And providers are enabling people and businesses to manage their legal needs entirely online. And there are many, many DIY products that are being produced and utilised. So chatbots, for example, becoming very common to support consumers through an array of legal matters. And e-billing, time recording, document management systems are all being used routinely and include platformization, which enables lawyers to work in a connected and collaborative way that captures data, and this is the really key thing, so that it can be utilized and analyzed, and you therefore get a different insight from a big data set than you would from individual cases. And of course, COVID has sped up the use of electronic signatures, which are now becoming ubiquitous, and online identification is also reducing cost and risk. And the digitization of the process means that all parties have, in effect, a digital identity. And so documents can be signed on chain, opening up the possibility of members of the public being able to act as notaries or witnesses to attest signatures. So we can really crowdsource law in the future. So there's a lot to take in. It's a big old landscape, but I thought I would just finish with a couple of thoughts about COVID. And you know, overall, COVID has really accelerated digital innovation. You know, and particularly, I would say, in the legal world. So, court hearings, seamless move to video communications, expansion of cloud-based systems, and normalising flexible and remote working, which I have to say is actually really, really good for diversity and inclusion as well. It's something that we banged on a lot about before the pandemic, with little success in terms of persuading Big Law that it was a good thing to do, and wham bam, we managed to do it on a sixpence. And a recent study showed that COVID had sped up digital transformation by 5.3 years. So what was the nice to have is actually now plays a critical part in maintaining business continuity. And as a profession, we've become much more tech savvy, functionally familiar with emerging technologies, and we have had our collective eyes opened. And so I think that in many ways we are now ready. And so if we get this right, there is great things in store for the legal profession. We have to keep pace to deliver what society and the economy need. So from my perspective, law tech is an investment really in the infrastructure of society and the rule of law. It can help us move to a place where society and business need us to go. We can improve our very poor global performance on access to justice with better legal information and services that are accessible to all, enabled through technology. We can more effectively manage risk and mitigate harm in an ever-changing world. And we can support businesses and individuals to dissolve or solve their disputes, maximising their rights. We can provide digital contracts that empower efficient, transparent interaction and trade. And finally, we can open up the black box of data to provide access to structured legal data, to share knowledge and train in a fair and an unbiased way the algorithms that will ensure our success in the future. So I am going to close there. I cut out a lot of my speech, but I think if anybody's really interested in terms of arbitration and what this means for you guys, then we can have that discussion over a glass of wine. Thank you very much for being so attentive.